Hey guys, tonight we're going to explore something that might sound, well, like nothing much at all. But that's the point, right? You're here for the kind of story where even a pot of mushy grains can reveal an entire lost world and maybe lull you right to sleep while doing it. So get ready to whisper through some medieval steam spoonfuls of morning slop and the surprisingly delicate rhythms of poor farmers just trying to make it to noon. So before you relax, take a second to like and subscribe if you find value in what we share. And while you're here, drop a comment with your time zone and what the sky looks like out your window tonight. Dim those lights, fire up a fan for that cozy background sound, and let's settle in for the journey ahead. The sun hasn't quite risen yet. You're awake not because you want to be, but because the rooster next door doesn't understand the concept of boundaries. His call cracks the last of the night's silence like a bad lute string, and soon after the cold creeps in to take over where dreams leave off. You're lying on a mat of straw and woven wool barely thick enough to pretend it's a bed. The smell of damp earth and old wood surrounds you, and just a few feet away your neighbor, who is also your uncle, your godfather, and possibly your landlord, lets out a sigh that could belong to a dying bellows. Your stomach growls louder than the rooster. It's breakfast time. But breakfast doesn't mean sizzling bacon or golden pancakes stacked like soft architecture. No. Breakfast here in this 14th century farmhouse tucked behind an ox-plowed field and 3 lazy goats means chow kei millet porridge. You drag yourself up, rubbing your eyes with the same sleeve you'll probably use to clean a bucket later. Your feet touch the cool dirt floor and you make your way toward the hearth. The fire's gone out, but the stones are still warm. That's good enough for now. In a small blackened pot sits the treasure of the morning mush. A thin gruel of boiled millet made last night, left to sit and grow a soft crust. The top has formed a skin-like pudding with commitment issues. You stir it gently. The spoon you use is carved from wood, slightly chewed at the end, possibly by a child or by time. There's no salt. That was used up 2 weeks ago, and the nearest trade cart is still 3 days late. But the porridge has absorbed the smoke from last night's fire. There's something pleasant about it. Smoky, earthy, a little sour, like the flavor of patience. You scoop out a portion into a wooden bowl, no pattern, just soft dents from long-forgotten drops, and you blow on it. It's not hot. It's barely warm. But it's familiar. It fills the stomach like a promise. You sit by the doorway, watching the sky go from navy to blue, a slow watercolor behind bare trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, a wheel creaks, and someone shouts about a missing goose. It's morning. You eat in silence. The millet porridge slides down slowly, heavy but comforting. It clings to your ribs like it's signing a lease. Now here's the historical truth. Millet was one of the most commonly eaten grains in much of medieval Europe and Asia. It grows quickly, doesn't mind poor soil, and stores well, perfect for people who didn't have time for crop drama. Before wheat took over the elite diet and before rice spread northward, millet was the backbone of breakfasts across farms like yours. But here's the odd bit. In certain monastic records from 12th century France, monks complained that millet made them feel too lightheaded to chant properly. Whether that's because they weren't eating enough or because the fermentation got a little too enthusiastic. Well, scholars still raise an eyebrow at that one, and that's where the scholarly debate peeks in. Some food historians argue that millet-based porridge was a sign of poverty, a bottom-rung food barely considered human-worthy. Others insist it was a choice light on the stomach, quick to make and deeply rooted in tradition. So was millet gruel the sad slop of the poor, or a functional, even spiritual food of the humble and wise? Anyway, your bowl is empty now. The last bits of porridge cling to the sides, and you run your finger along the edge to catch what's left. Waste not. The cows don't. You hear movement in the loft above the sound of others waking. You're not alone in this morning rhythm. Soon someone will be drawing water, someone else stoking the hearth again. and you might be asked to help wash yesterday's tools with cold rainwater and rough cloth. Your hands will smell of iron and ash before the hour is done. But for a moment you sit there, bowl on your lap, face warmed by the tiniest trickle of morning light, and you feel okay, full enough, awake enough, ready to face whatever today thinks it can throw at you. 3 small jokes before we go on as promised. They say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. In the 14th century, that's mostly because it's the only one guaranteed not to be stolen by a goat. The good news about millet porridge, it's gluten-free. The bad news, so is everything else when you're this poor. You know you're a medieval peasant when you dream about adding water to your food and calling it a luxury. The sky is brighter now, and your story continues quietly, slowly, and always with something cooking. You don't always get fresh bread in the morning. In fact, fresh is a word that rarely appears in your vocabulary unless you're describing something unfortunate you just stepped in. But bread, good old stiff, tooth-threatening bread, is still part of the rhythm. And today it's what's waiting by the hearth, stacked on a worn wooden shelf like sleeping bricks. These are yesterday's loaves, or possibly the day before's. You're not entirely sure anymore. One is slightly gray at the edges, but that's not mold, that's ash from the fire. Probably. You knock on it gently with your knuckle. It makes a hollow sound like a confident door or a guilty chest. Still, this is breakfast. And in the life of a poor farmer, old bread isn't a sign of neglect, it's an opportunity. Especially when you have a few drops of oil left and the pan still holds the ghost of last night's stew. You grab the knife. It's not sharp, but it's determined. You press down on the loaf with both hands, slicing off a piece thick enough to feel like a meal, thin enough to not draw attention. The bread is dense, dark, and slightly sour from the wild yeast that made it rise, if you can call what it did rising. It's more of a dignified swelling. You dunk the slice in water for a few seconds. This is standard. Bread that's gone too hard must be humbled before it's edible again. A brief soak loosens it up just enough to avoid cracking your molars. Then you lay it on the flat pan above the coals and wait. The heat wakes up whatever life the bread still has. It sizzles slightly, soaks in the remnants of whatever last touched this surface onion. Maybe a carrot, something vaguely meaty you don't know, but your stomach is optimistic. This is what some people call pan toast. It's a far cry from the golden-crusted wonders of cafe breakfasts or Instagram stories. But in your world, this is practical magic. With enough time and attention, even a chunk of crusty sorrow can become something warm, something smelling faintly of roasted memory. You take the slice off the pan and hold it gently. It's steamy, a little soft in the middle, crisp around the edges. No butter, no jam, just bread and heat. And maybe a sprinkle of salt if you're lucky. Today you're not. You chew slowly. It's chewy, resistant, but not unkind. The flavor is grounding, earthy, slightly smoky, like wood and wheat had a long conversation in your mouth. You eat standing up because chairs are for dinner and you haven't earned that yet. Here's your historical tidbit. Medieval bread wasn't all the same. Wealthy folks ate white bread made from fine milled wheat flour, light, fluffy, and refined. You, on the other hand, get black bread, also known as rye and rubble loaf, made from a mix of rye, oats, leftover grains, and sometimes whatever was swept off the mill floor. Think of it as the smoothie of grains, hearty, unpredictable, and maybe slightly gritty. Now here's the quirky side note. In some 15th century village accounts, there are actual records of bread being rented. Yes, rented. A baker would bake massive loaves for a feast or ceremony, then lend them to be used as table centerpieces. They'd be returned after the event uneaten but honored. Imagine bread as your party's VIP guest, sitting there looking important and then quietly going back to the bakery like nothing happened. And the debate. Oh, it's ongoing. Some scholars argue that this dark, dense bread was a marker of poverty and desperation. Others note that it actually had more fiber and nutrients than the white bread of the elite, making it healthier if far less photogenic. The question remains, was peasant bread a punishment of circumstance or a quiet nutritional rebellion? You finish the slice, licking your fingers, not because it's sweet, but because every crumb counts. One of the chickens outside makes a sound like it disapproves of your chewing rhythm. You stare at it. It stares back. This is the dynamic you share. There's still a bit of crust left, too tough to bite, but not to waste. You break it into tiny chunks and toss it into a small pot of water by the fire. Add a bit of chopped leek, maybe a carrot if one hasn't gone bad yet, and you've got the beginnings of bread soup. That's tomorrow's breakfast if no one else eats it first. Someone walks by the doorway, a cousin or perhaps a stranger who just lives here now. They nod. You nod. Words before noon are optional in this household. You glance out at the fields beyond the cottage. The mist is lifting slowly, revealing patches of damp soil and the gentle outlines of furrows plowed by hand and hope. That's your afternoon sorted then, but right now you're full, or at least no longer hollow. And that's a rare and precious thing. Time for your 3 light chuckles if you haven't dozed off yet. They say stale bread builds character, which is convenient because it also chips teeth. If your toast takes longer to chew than to cook, congratulations, you're dining in medieval style. Remember, in the 1300s, reheating bread was not laziness, it was high cuisine with a budget. You rinse the pan with hot water and dry it with a square of linen that's seen better centuries. You put the leftover loaf back on the shelf. Tomorrow it will be even harder and possibly more flavorful. And so another peasant breakfast disappears into history, as simple and honest as the hands that prepared it. The day waits just beyond the door, but your story continues. The sun is barely up, but the layers of your world keep unfolding, one crumb at a time. You smell it before you see it. There's something sharp and earthy in the air, like rain on stone, but warmer, saltier. You follow the scent through the morning haze, past the empty fire pit and over to the small basket by the window where yesterday's oddities live. Inside, nestled among straw and a questionable rag, are trungvit moi touche, a salted duck eggs peasant edition. They're not shining white or perfectly round like the ones nobles draw in their manuscripts. No. These are blotchy beige and slightly dusty, coated in a strange mixture of ash clay and leftover rice husks. They look like someone rolled them through a compost pile and said, "Yes, that'll do nicely." And honestly, it does. These eggs were buried literally. About 2 weeks ago, you took the last decent batch, wrapped them in a concoction of salt wood ash and damp clay, and tucked them into a crock under the stairs. No ceremony, just survival. You didn't even bother to mark the jar. It's not like you have 10 jars, you have the jar. Today, curiosity wins over caution. You knock one gently against the stone sill and hear a satisfying crack. The shell comes off in pieces, trailing bits of gray ash. Inside, a small miracle. The egg is firm, just a little oily, with a yolk so golden it looks smug about it. You slice it with a dull knife. The white is bouncy salty, like the sea you'll probably never see. The yolk is dense, creamy, almost crumbly, like someone mixed sunshine with sand. You pop a bite into your mouth and nearly hum. Here's the beauty: these eggs taste like they've been somewhere. They're bold, not fresh in the usual way, but experienced. They've sat in darkness, soaked up flavor from the salt and the earth, and emerged transformed. You respect that kind of breakfast. Historically speaking, preserved eggs weren't just an accident. In parts of East and Southeast Asia, duck eggs were commonly salted for long storage, especially before seasonal shortages. In medieval Europe, versions of this existed. 2 eggs were packed in lime water, wood ash, or even brine, depending on what you had and how desperate you were to not eat the same porridge again. Oddly enough, there's a record from 1392 in a small Dutch farming village where farmers reportedly swapped salted eggs as wedding gifts. Yes, wedding gifts. You can imagine the exchange now. Here may your union be as firm and durable as this egg. Romance was different back then. The academic debate preservation was often seen as a mark of ingenuity, turning ephemeral ingredients into edible insurance policies. But some scholars argue it was also a necessity born of restriction, especially in colder regions or during fasting periods. So was the salted egg a symbol of clever culinary control, or a salty oval-shaped cry for help? Either way, it's delicious. You eat slowly, reverently. Just one egg between 3 people, but it makes a difference. The salt clings to your tongue, the richness fills in the cracks left by last night's watery soup, and for a moment your mouth forgets it lives in a poor farmer's body. You don't even need bread. You just sit on the edge of the doorway, egg in hand, watching the fog lift from the turnip field like a curtain rising on a very gray play. The air smells like wet grass and wood smoke. You eat in silence, the yolk crumbling like gold dust on your lips. Nearby, a child picks up a chicken. The chicken is not pleased. This has nothing to do with breakfast, but it feels deeply on brand for the morning. And here come your 3 sleepy chuckles, salted duck egg, the only food that improves by being buried and forgotten like your homework. You know you're a medieval peasant when the fanciest thing in your house is an egg that smells like sulfur and hope. Some people get perfume for their birthdays. In 1392, you got pickled protein. Same emotion, more cholesterol. You lick the last of the yolk from your fingertips. It tastes of fire and salt and something strangely luxurious, like maybe your tongue remembers a better life. The child returns the chicken, which now refuses to make eye contact. The fog has mostly gone, revealing rows of damp soil ready to be tilled, trudged, and mildly cursed at. But for now, there's still a few minutes of calm before work begins, just long enough to clean the knife and whisper a thank you to the duck who never got to meet her children. The egg may have been humble. The breakfast may have been brief, but it lingered on your tongue like a story. And now your day begins in full, fueled by fermentation ash and quiet resilience. You don't usually think of beer as breakfast, but when the water is murky, the well's been moody all week, and your cousin swears the frogs swimming in the bucket look judgmental, then yes, you reach for the beer. Not a mug of foamy ale or some frosty pint that pairs well with tavern brawls. No. What you have is nuach bia long, also known as small beer. It's been sitting in a clay jug by the hearth, covered loosely with cloth, slightly fizzing like it's thinking about bubbling, but changed its mind halfway through. You pour a little into a wooden cup. It's the color of weak tea and smells like bread that's lost its ambition. A few bubbles wobble to the top and vanish. You take a cautious sip. It tastes like someone whispered the idea of beer into a puddle. But here's the thing, it's clean. Or at least cleaner than most of the water. The brewing process, boiling the grain, fermenting it, straining it, kills enough of the invisible nasties to make this not just acceptable, but wise. And in your house, the children drink it too. Yes, beer for breakfast. A sip for grandpa, a gulp for the toddler. This isn't rebellion, it's hydration. The beer is made from barley sweepings, leftovers, and enough yeast to count as optimism. It's barely alcoholic, just enough to keep the bacteria on their toes, not enough to make anyone dance on the table. Which is good, because the table only has 3 legs. Historically, small beer or small ale in England was standard fare in peasant diets. People drank it all day, not to party, but to stay alive. In fact, many medieval households brewed it weekly, often under the direction of the housewife. Records from 14th century monasteries show that monks received a daily ration of small beer during fasts because it didn't count as food. Imagine loopholing your way to a buzz during Lent. And here's your fun oddity in one Flemish town in the 13th century. The local authorities mandated that beer jugs be made with holes near the bottom, so you had to drink it quickly or else spill it. The official reason, sanitation. The actual reason, probably just a very bored city council. Now, the scholarly disagreement, some researchers suggest small beer had meaningful nutritional value, calories. B vitamins, even trace minerals from the brewing process. Others argue that it was mostly ritual hydration, more comforting than nourishing, like the medieval version of emotional support seltzer. Which is it? The debate foams on. You finish your cup and sigh. The beer's done its job. It's taken the edge off your thirst and made your insides feel slightly less like sandpaper. You pour a second cup and dunk a chunk of bread into it. This apparently counts as soup, and you're not alone. Outside, one of the neighbors, an old man with eyebrows that deserve their own name, raises his cup in sleepy salute. You raise yours back because traditions matter. The sky is properly awake now, and you can hear the cows making their daily complaints. A rooster screams again. He's still wrong about the hour. But the beer has settled warmly in your belly, and for a few minutes everything feels balanced if mildly fermented. Here come your 3 giggle-worthy toasts. May your enemies be as weak as this beer and as quickly forgotten. In medieval times, we drank beer to stay healthy. Today, we just call that brunch. Nothing says I've given up on clean water like sharing your beer with a toddler. You clean the cup with a handful of hay and a very relaxed attitude toward hygiene. The jug goes back to its spot, gently fizzing as if to say until next time. And just like that, you're ready. Not for war, not for poetry, but for another long day of digging, sweating, and trying not to step in anything soft and surprising. Still, your stomach is warm, your head is clear, and your spirit, thanks to a thimble of barley water, is just tipsy enough to call this morning gentle. Some mornings are loud dogs, barking children chasing each other with sticks, someone yelling about a goat on the roof. But not this morning. This morning begins in silence, except for the crunch. You're chewing pickled white radish, and the sound it makes is half breakfast, half percussion. It's a kind of music you don't question, just enjoy, especially when you haven't heard anything crisp in weeks. You pull another sliver from the bowl. It's pale, nearly translucent, soaked through with salt herbs and whatever that green thing was you accidentally dropped in last week. You're pretty sure it wasn't poison. The radish tastes sharp, cold, and bracing like a vegetable slap across the face, and yet refreshing. You eat slowly, spacing out each bite like it's a precious letter from a long-lost friend. One that reads, "Hi, I'm still here. Rooty, tangy, slightly funky. Yours in crunch." This particular batch of pickled radish has been sitting in a sealed ceramic jar for 10 days. Some might call it just right, others might call it absolutely questionable. But in your world, it's perfect. It cuts through the monotony of porridge and grain with its vinegary spark and biting clarity. This isn't a side dish, it's an event. White radish isn't glamorous, it's not the kind of root you brag about at court. But for farmers like you, it's a hero. Easy to grow, hard to kill, and even harder to make unappetizing once you've discovered the magic of salt and thyme. You reach for another piece. Your fingers smell like brine. You don't mind. It's the scent of practicality. Here's your historical bite in medieval Asia, especially in China, Korea, and Vietnam. Pickled radish was both common and beloved. It stored well-required minimal equipment and even aided digestion, something greatly appreciated in a world where most meals involved 20 minutes of chewing and a whispered prayer. In Europe, radishes were known, though less beloved, often served raw, sometimes with butter, and occasionally used as a medicine for flatulence. Yes, documented, repeatedly. A fun sidebar. In 1487, a small Polish village hosted a radish fair complete with competitive vegetable carving. The winner received half a goose and a brand new spoon. Possibly the earliest recorded instance of root vegetable art leading to poultry-based reward. Now, for the scholarly squabble, were pickled vegetables a luxury or a necessity? Some argue they were how the poor survived winter. Others insist the practice required enough salt jars and foresight to suggest a degree of culinary planning. So was your crunchy breakfast an act of desperation or quiet sophistication? Either way, you are not complaining. Today you've paired it with a leftover heel of rye bread, dry as gossip and just as sharp. Together they make a kind of harmony. The radish brings sting, the bread brings stability. You chew slowly, their textures balancing like an old married couple who no longer speak but still hold hands. Someone nearby sneezes, loudly, possibly in German. You choose not to investigate. Outside light spills across the frost-tipped cabbage patch. Dew glints on everything, turning weeds into temporary treasure. Your breath fogs gently as you exhale, a quiet reminder that winter is waiting somewhere just behind the trees. You tighten your cloak and take another bite. This one is particularly fiery. It burns a little as it slides down. Your eyes water, not from emotion, just from sinus surprise. Still, the sensation is oddly comforting. You remember the woman who first taught you how to salt radish. She was missing 3 teeth and had a laugh like a door slamming in the wind, but she knew her roots. If it doesn't tingle the back of your head, she once said, it's not ready. Well, this one just rebooted your brain. Success. You step outside carrying the rest of the radish in a little bowl, not because you're still hungry, but because you know that if you don't finish it, someone else will. And you have complicated feelings about sharing. You settle on a big flat stone at the edge of the vegetable patch where the morning sun lands just right, as if the sky remembered you. The bowl sits in your lap, full of humble little slices, some curled, some cracked from salt. Their beauty isn't in symmetry, but in story. You remember your first time learning to pickle radish. It was a bitter winter. The potatoes had gone soft from damp, the bread was moldy, and only a few sad radishes remained in the cellar. Your grandmother, a woman whose hands always smelled of soil and smoke, sighed and said, it's fine. We'll give them a second life. She sliced the radish, sprinkled salt, tossed in some herbs, and probably a weed or two, and pressed it all into a stone jar. Wait a week, she said, and don't open it early. Food needs silence to become itself. A week later, the entire cellar smelled of salt and something sharp and brave. You tried the first piece and nearly cried, not because it was delicious, but because for the first time in weeks, something had spoken to your tongue like it had a soul. You take another slice, bite half, let the other half rest on your tongue like a candy. You don't rush. This is a ceremony. In the distance, 2 neighbor children are digging a hole in the yard, not gardening. They're searching for a spoon they buried after a fight over who got the last scrape from the porridge pot. Local legend says if you find a spoon that once touched the bottom of the pot during a feast, you'll be lucky all month. No one knows exactly what that means, but everyone tries anyway. You recall another old tale. In a mountaintop village in medieval Japan, people believed that if you ate pickled radish on the first morning of the year, your household would never skip breakfast for the rest of that year. A humble wish. And so they pickled through December, hanging jars from rafters to let the wind see your effort. Some modern scholars argue that pickling wasn't just about survival, it was social. People salted together, sharing roots, jars, stories, and quiet worry. In many villages, pickle-making afternoons doubled as informal town meetings. Every jar of pickled radish was a time capsule sealed in brine, waiting to be read by the tongue. You close your eyes for a second, not to meditate, just to thank someone somewhere who figured out how to turn radishes into treasure. Last piece, a thick one with visible grain. You think about saving it, but eat it anyway. No use wasting a good ending. And now, as always, your 3 little jokes. Pickled radish, the only food that wakes you up and forgives the weather. Salt preserves vegetables, yes, but it also preserves memories and possibly yesterday's argument. If your breakfast goes crunch, it's either a good ferment or your tooth just gave up. You stand brushing off your tunic. The bowl feels light, empty, dignified, like a little drum that just finished its solo. A breeze stirs. Not enough to chill you, but enough to remind you you're alive. And so another morning begins. 1 slice of radish, 1 story. 1 more reason to believe that quiet food can have sharp edges and long memories. And somehow you feel wide awake, ears popping. Cheeks flushed, heart humming gently inside your chest. This morning your breakfast bites back. Not because it's gone bad. No, this one is supposed to sting a little. You've pulled out a small cloth bundle from the pantry shelf, the one tied with the string made from old twine and hope, and inside are crumbs of cold cheese and burnt crusts of bread from yesterday's dinner. But you're not eating them cold. You're frying them. Yes. In fat saved from last week's stew, because nothing gets thrown away here unless the chickens beat you to it. You crouch over the hearth where the fire still smolders from someone's early rising. You add a little more dry hay blow gently and coax it into waking. The pan is blackened, its handle worn smooth from generations of hopeful sizzling. Into it go the scraps. First the cheese, which hisses like it's offended to be reheated, then the crusts, which soak up the oil like they're trying to forget their past. You press them flat with the back of a spoon, the pan crackles, the smell rises, sharp, nutty, smoky animal. You know it's working when someone from the loft mumbles, "Is that breakfast or revenge?" You don't answer. Instead, you turn the edges, watch them go from soft to crisp. Watch the oil bubble like gossip in a small town. A moment longer and it's done. You slide everything onto a wooden plate, the crusts now golden and curling, the cheese browned and fragrant. It doesn't look like much, but it smells like heaven decided to open a bakery in a peasant's kitchen. You sit down near the door again because it's the best lit spot in the house and begin the meal. The first bite is crunchy. The second is chewy. The third burns your tongue a little because you always forget to wait. This isn't just food, it's alchemy. The transformation of scraps into warmth, of leftovers into comfort. You close your eyes briefly and let the flavors fill the cracks in your soul. Historically speaking, frying food in animal fat was an old and widespread technique, especially among the poor. Butter was expensive. Olive oil, a distant dream. But fat rendered from bacon, lamb, or even goose, that was treasure. It was saved, reused, honored like a beloved relative who couldn't speak but made everything taste better. Peasants in medieval France, for instance, often fried stale bread in drippings and called it pain doré, a golden name for golden scraps. In Germany, they had Armritter, or poor knights, essentially bread soaked in milk and fried until heroic. The names tried to dress the dishes up, but the truth was it was poverty cuisine with a flair for drama. The quirky fact. In some parts of England, farmers believed that eating fried cheese in the morning could ward off melancholy. A cheese talisman, if you will. There are even scattered records of villagers whispering a cheese crisp in the morning keeps death from your doorstep. No one knows if it worked, but you do feel oddly alive right now. And the academic debate. Some historians argue that frying was a sign of indulgence even among the poor because fat was precious and fire wasn't free. Others insist it was simply survival logic. When food gets old, fry it until it forgets. The jury's still out, possibly because they're busy chewing. You finish the cheese crisps, licking your fingers for the last trace of oil. You feel satisfied. Not full, but satisfied, like you just read a good poem or found a smooth stone in your shoe and admired it before tossing it aside. The chickens seem jealous. You offer them a crust. They peck it with suspicion. Even they seem to know it's a step above their pay grade. Time for your 3 crispy jokes. If you fry it and it still tastes bad, it wasn't food to begin with. Medieval rule. If it's not edible yet, just add fat and flame until it changes its mind. Leftovers, no. You mean pre-seasoned breakfast ingredients. You wipe the pan with a fistful of hay, a ragged cloth, and a prayer, and hang it back on its nail. The kitchen smells like warmth and good decisions. You'll ride that scent into the afternoon. Outside, the frost is melting in little beads along the stone path. You step out feeling light. Not because the meal was rich, but because you turn nothing into something. And that, in this world, is power. One belly, one pan, one quiet ritual at a time, you begin the rest of your day. You stretch your legs and lean back against the door frame, the last of the warmth still lingering in your fingers. The taste of fried cheese and crisp bread clings to your tongue like a melody you didn't realize you missed. This isn't just breakfast, it's memory, it's community, it's home in edible form. You think about the smell, how it curls through the rafters, how it wraps around the beams and soaks into the old wool curtains. The scent of fried scraps has weight here. It anchors people. It announces quietly someone woke up and made something real. In villages like yours, people notice things like smells. Because in a world of sameness, repetition, and survival, a small change in the air is practically news. If someone is frying cheese in the morning, you know 3 things. 1, they had cheese. 2, they're not sick. 3, they're still trying. And that's enough reason to be curious. A knock on the doorframe. It's your neighbor, old Marius, the man who once sneezed so hard he claimed to have remembered his past life. He looks at you, sniffs the air, and says you made the pan sing this morning. You offer him a crust. He takes it with surprising grace for someone missing 2 fingers. He chews slowly, nods. This tastes like 1427, he says, then walks away. You don't ask. But you know what he means. Food has years in it, not just minutes and calories. That pan has seen births, funerals, harvests, and winters. Every time it sizzles, it plays a little tune made from ghosts and gratitude. You stare at it still hanging by the fire. You think of the hands that held it before yours, the times it was nearly thrown out and the times it was the only thing that kept people alive, and you smile just a little. There's a rhythm to mornings like this, an unspoken script of scraping, sizzling, sharing. Someone brings an onion. Someone else has garlic. Someone drops by with a tiny wedge of sour goat cheese so strong it might be illegal in better-funded kingdoms. Together it becomes breakfast for 5, maybe 6. You've seen it happen. You've made it happen. There was that one winter morning, deep snow outside, wind screaming like a widow through the cracks in the shutters when you and 3 neighbors fried every stale scrap you could find and called it festival stew. It wasn't stew, it was barely chewable. But you told jokes until someone laughed themselves warm. That's what mornings like this are about, not warmth. But the illusion of warmth extended just long enough for the heart to catch up. You grab the last bit of crust stuck to the side of the plate and suck the oil off your fingers. It tastes like salt and survival. Now let's slide in 3 more sleepy laughs before you move on. You know it's a good breakfast when your neighbor shows up uninvited and leaves full anyway. Fried cheese may not solve your problems, but it makes you forget how hungry you are while having them. Some mornings you don't eat to survive, you eat to remember that you're still you. You glance toward the fields. Work is waiting, there's a fence to mend weeds, to mock, and a chicken that's been giving you the side eye all week. But you're in no rush. You linger for a moment more, letting the scent of breakfast fade into the wood. 1 meal, 1 pan, 1 ritual. You've reminded the house that it's still a home. And in a world where the weather is rude, the roof leaks in 3 spots and the goats don't respect personal space, that's more than enough to carry you into the day. The sun is up now, casting long pale beams across the path. You rise, stretch your back, and crack your knuckles. It's time to face the chores, but you do so with a belly kissed by crisp fat and a spirit that for once didn't start the day with emptiness. The pan winks from the hook. You nod back. You'll see each other again tomorrow. It begins with a whisper. Not a sound, really, but a scent. You lift the lid of the old clay pot sitting beneath the low shelf, and immediately the sharp, earthy tang of fermented beans rises to meet your face like a stern grandmother checking if you've washed. It's intense. It's confident. And strangely, it's comforting. This is Jiaonan Hapva Bingo Moi steamed soybeans and fermented pumpkin. A breakfast born not from abundance, but from ingenuity. You didn't invent it. You inherited it. The recipe was passed down like an heirloom that can rot if you're careless. You scoop a handful of the soybeans first. They've been steamed and stored for 3 days, just long enough to firm up without going rubbery. They're soft to the touch, pale beige with a slight sheen of oil because yesterday you remembered to save the fat from that one piece of salted duck. Next comes the pumpkin cut into small, thin pieces. It's once bright orange, now faded into a mellow golden brown. From the pickling brine, it smells slightly sweet, faintly sour, and a little wild. the kind of food that insists on being taken seriously. You put both into a small pot, add a splash of water, and set it near the fire, not on it. Just close enough to wake up slowly. As it warms, you prepare the bowl. It's the same bowl you've used for years, wooden, cracked, patched with a bit of pitch and string. It leaks slightly if you're not careful. You turn it in your hands, watching the morning light dance across its surface. The bowl has seen more winters than some people you know. The steam begins to rise. The scent deepens. Soy and salt and something faintly nutty, almost toasted. You smile despite yourself. Breakfast is not meant to impress anyone. It is meant to ground you. You pour the warmed mixture into the bowl and carry it to your usual spot by the door. The sun isn't all the way up, but the edge of the world is glowing pale pink. You eat slowly. The soybeans are firm but yielding. The pumpkin is chewy, a little spicy, with that fermented funk that makes you feel like your tongue just met someone interesting. Each bite is mild but layered, like music played softly on old strings. Historically speaking, soybeans were a staple in many pre-modern agricultural societies, especially across East and Southeast Asia. They were cheap, easy to grow, and astonishingly nutritious. By steaming or boiling them, peasants could create a filling, protein-rich base that stayed soft for days. Fermented vegetables like pumpkin or gourd were the natural pair. In times before refrigeration, salt and thyme were the only preservatives. Together, beans and pickles formed a quiet alliance against hunger. Odd fact, in a rural Vietnamese village in the 13th century, there's record of a monk who wrote poems to pickled pumpkin slices. Real poems. Devotional. Sensual. In one, he described them as sunset caught in a jar. No one knows if he ever published them, but the monastery kitchen reportedly kept a copy above the fire until it burned in a lightning storm. No metaphor needed. The debate, as always, is subtle. Some culinary historians claim this kind of breakfast was accidental gastronomy flavors that emerged simply because the food wouldn't survive otherwise. Others argue these pairings show intention, craft, even artistry. That people weren't just surviving, they were composing. And you believe that. Because right now, with the bowl warm in your hands and the steam rising gently around your cheeks, this isn't just survival food. This is flavor architecture. Humble, quiet, but complex enough to make your brain sit up and pay attention. You finish half and pause, not out of fullness, but reverence. You think about the hands that first figured this out. The farmers who cut pumpkin into thin slivers, not for appearance, but so the salt could reach every cell. The patience of someone waiting 10 days for the flavor to bloom. The joy of tasting something bold when all you expected was bland. You take another bite and close your eyes. The pumpkin has softened. The beans have soaked in the brine. Together they feel like a conversation between soil and sunlight, between harvest and hunger, between who you are and who you were before this meal. Your cousin walks past and grunts. That's his way of saying morning. You nod. That's yours. He eyes your bowl but knows better than to ask. Last time he did, you gave him a piece of pickled garlic that cleared his sinuses and his memory. 3 savory chuckles for your morning. They say flavor develops over time. So does suspicion when someone else wants a bite. Soybeans and pickles, because nothing says refined palate like controlled spoilage. If your breakfast smells stronger than your cousin, you're doing something right. You finish the bowl slowly. Let the last few beans roll against your teeth. The salt lingers. The pumpkin sweetness hums quietly in the corners of your mouth. You wipe the bowl with your finger, not out of manners, but instinct. Waste nothing, taste everything. Outside, the day is warming. Someone's shouting about a missing hoe. Someone else is coughing like it owes them money. The usual, but in here, in this moment, you are still. Grounded. Fed. Honored by food that was never meant to be fancy, but somehow became sacred anyway. You set the bowl down gently and the fire gives one last soft pop as if approving. The morning sun hasn't risen high yet, but the light has changed. It's warmer now, casting gentle gold across the uneven floorboards. slipping through the chinks in the wall like a quiet guest. You're back by the fire, and today you're making something rare, something a little daring, namrung nong va ban. Chow chien grilled wild mushrooms and leftover porridge fried crisp into little discs. It begins with a walk, before dawn with a basket slung over your back and your feet still half asleep. You stepped into the woods just a short way past the field boundary where the ferns start to arch like old women's backs. And the moss feels like whispered secrets under your soles. You didn't go alone. You never do not when mushrooms are involved. Your aunt, who walks faster than you and curses more creatively, led the way. She can spot a good mushroom from 15 paces and a bad one even faster. If it looks smug, she told you once, leave it. Poisonous things always look confident. Today's haul was small but decent. 2 clusters of brown caps, 1 shelf fungus she swears by, and a single trembling white mushroom she sniffed, frowned at, and declared mysterious. That one went back in the ground with a muttered prayer. Now back home, you've cleaned the mushrooms with a damp cloth, never water. Or they get sullen and laid them over a grate by the hearth. The fire below is low lazy, just enough to coax out the aroma. Meanwhile, you've opened the pot of yesterday's congealed rice porridge. It's not inspiring. It looks like an abandoned experiment, but you know the secret. You take a spoon and scoop the cold, thick porridge into your palm, shaping it into small cakes. Rough, round, uneven. You coat them lightly in crushed grain barley or rice husk, whatever's nearby, and press them flat. Onto the pan they go. The oil hisses, welcoming the discs like old friends. Soon they begin to brown, little bubbles forming along the edges, the outside crisping while the inside stays soft and starchy. You flip one, it holds together. Always a good sign. The mushrooms, meanwhile, have started to curl at the edges. Their scent is stronger now, woody, earthy, with a hint of dark sweetness like wet bark and fire smoke. You poke one gently and it gives a little, surrendering its firmness to the heat. A few minutes later, you plate everything. 3 mushroom caps, each kissed by flame and slightly wrinkled. 2 porridge cakes crisp to a golden brown. A handful of pickled garlic slivers for contrast, because your aunt insists every story needs a plot twist. You sit by the door again, because why change a good habit? The first bite is the porridge cake, hot, crispy, chewy. It tastes like grain remembered through fire. Simple but deeply satisfying. Like a conversation with someone who doesn't waste words. The mushrooms are something else entirely. The texture is soft but meaty, tender but not weak. The flavor is deep, like the forest left a signature in your mouth. Each bite carries notes of wood smoke, soil, and something faintly metallic. Not unpleasant. Just real. You eat slowly, respectfully. These are not ingredients to be rushed. Here's the truth: foraging mushrooms was both normal and radical for the poor. Normal because wild food was free. Radical because it was dangerous. One mistake and breakfast became a eulogy. Still, across medieval Europe and Asia, peasants gathered wild mushrooms with a mix of expertise and superstition. Some families had generational knowledge what to pick, when to pick it, and which ones to leave for the forest spirits. In Japan, meitake mushrooms were once called dancing mushrooms because people were said to dance with joy upon finding them. In France, truffle hunters used pigs. In your village, you use Aunt Hoa, who grumbles like a pig and has a better nose. Odd historical tidbit. In 1423, a Hungarian town banned all mushroom picking within 2 miles of the market, claiming too many funerals for a fungus. The law was repealed a year later after the town priest was caught hoarding chanterelles, and the academic debate was mushroom foraging a mark of poverty or of culinary pride. Some scholars argue it was the cuisine of desperation. Others insist it represented a sophisticated, intuitive relationship with nature, food gathered by memory and feel, not market and coin. You chew thoughtfully. You know your answer. Aunt Hoa wanders by, takes a bite without asking, nods, and walks away muttering, "Not dead yet. Must be good." 3 warm chuckles for this earthy meal. You know it's a risky breakfast when someone watches you eat it, just in case. Mushrooms are like people. The weird ones are usually fine. It's the confident ones you watch out for. Cold porridge fried crispy may not be glamorous, but it's peasant-level genius at its finest. You finish the last porridge cake, savoring the contrast of texture's crispy edge, gooey center. The mushrooms leave a warm umami trail on your tongue like a forest memory you weren't supposed to keep. You clean your hands on your shirt. You clean your shirt on the wind. Outside, the trees shift gently. The wind smells like sap and damp stone. You stand slowly, stretch your back, and feel a lightness that wasn't there before. Maybe it's the food. Maybe it's the quiet victory of making something alive from yesterday's leftovers and today's forest floor. You look down at the empty bowl and nod, not out of habit, but respect. You may not have riches, but you have memory, fire, and taste, and that this morning was enough. The cold this morning is different. Not the sharp bite of early frost or the lazy damp of a foggy dawn. This is the kind that settles into your clothes before you've even left the bed. It wraps around your toes and your elbows and the tips of your ears. It hums. Naturally, it calls for chow yen mak no zam, grayish oat porridge, unflavored, unsalted, uninspired, and yet absolutely necessary. You don't even need to think. Your hands are already scooping the oats from the old sack in the corner, the one you keep tied with a bit of fraying red thread, not for superstition, but because it makes the bag easier to find in the half-dark. A pinch here, a handful there. Into the pot they go, mixed with water from the barrel and nothing else. No milk, no sweetener, not even the ghost of a spice. Just grain and heat. You stir slowly. Oats are moody. They require patience. Cook them too fast and they sulk into lumps. Too slow and they become watery self-pity. The porridge thickens, steam rising in soft white threads. It smells faintly of hay and stone and old paper. Comforting in a bland sort of way. You imagine your stomach nodding quietly, not excited but grateful. You pour the hot oats into your usual bowl. They slide out in a single slumping mass. It jiggles slightly before settling like it needs a moment to accept its fate. You sit by the fire, pull the bowl close, and begin to eat. The first spoonful is a quiet experience. No fireworks, no surprises, just warmth, texture, weight. It fills you without comment, like a story you've heard before and still want to hear again. This is survival food, but it's also a kind of devotion. Oats have been with you longer than most people. They don't spoil easily, don't demand much. A sack of oats will see you through storms, lean months, failed harvests. They are humble, gray, and loyal. Historically, oats were considered poor food in much of medieval Europe. Wheat was the grain of kings and priests. Oats were for horses, monks, and farmers. The English mocked the Scots for their oat-heavy diet, and the Scots replied, "That's why you have sick horses and we have strong men." In Ireland and parts of northern France, oats were treasured, especially in porridge form. They were often cooked at night and left on the hearth to thicken by morning. A good oat porridge could stretch for 2 meals, sometimes 3 if you didn't mind scraping the crust. And speaking of crust, there's a bit forming around the edge of your bowl now. You smile. That's the best part. You save it for last. Here's a quirky detail. In a 14th century Benedictine abbey, the monks referred to their morning oats as the silent sermon. No one was allowed to talk until the bowls were empty. One monk reportedly carved a smiling face into his oats each morning to express joy silently. It became a minor scandal. The carving was banned. The monk became a local legend. And now the scholarly debate. Some say oat porridge was a sign of peasant poverty, a meal of necessity, not choice. Others argue it was deeply spiritual, warm, sustaining quiet. A food of intentional simplicity, perfect for contemplation. Was it survival? Was it ritual, or was it both? You take another bite. The heat has softened the oats into near mush, but there's still resistance, little pockets of chew like tiny reminders to slow down. To chew. To think. You add a splash of water to the last bit in your bowl and stir. This thins it just enough to drink. The warmth travels all the way down like a slow candle behind your ribs. This morning your body needed this. Not excitement, not flair, just stability. Time for your 3 quietly content chuckles. You know breakfast is working when it tastes like a soft apology from the universe. Oats, because sometimes your soul just needs a warm beige hug. If your porridge is exciting, you probably added something, and we don't do that here. You scrape the last bits from the edge. The crust is chewy, firm, slightly darker in color. It tastes faintly of toast and patience. You chew slowly. Outside, the wind makes the shutters creak. The smoke from the fire curls like a sleepy cat. There's nothing urgent about this moment, and that's rare. You set the bowl aside and wrap your arms around your knees, just for a while. Let the oats settle. Let the day wait. This meal wasn't memorable in the usual sense, but it was anchoring. It reminded you of who you are, what you've survived, and what waits for you outside that door. And in a world full of surprises, sometimes the best thing you can eat is the thing that doesn't surprise you at all. You wake to the smell of onions, not the raw, biting sort that makes your eyes sting and your fingers smell like regret. No, these are soft, sleepy onions, hanku, heonin, trong, nuoc shuang, simmered into submission, gently unraveling in a pot of warm broth made from the bones of something no longer identifiable. You don't ask, you just breathe it in. It's the kind of breakfast that starts before you even sit up. Someone, probably Uncle Ben, started the pot at dawn, maybe earlier. He does that sometimes when the chill has teeth. You hear him now somewhere in the back muttering to himself as he chops something else to add. His muttering is comforting. It means the world is still turning. You rise, wrap your blanket around your shoulders like a dignified ghost, and make your way to the hearth. The pot is steaming, the lid tilted. You peek inside. There, swimming lazily in golden brown broth, are slivers of onion so soft they look like silk threads. A few leaves, possibly cabbage, definitely tired, float nearby. A piece of turnip. A bit of marrow if you're lucky. You ladle a scoop into your bowl. The broth is clear but full of depth. It smells like the color amber, rich, warm, just a little smoky. You take a sip and everything in you exhales. You add nothing. No salt. No pepper. This is not a dish that welcomes additions. It is exactly what it needs to be subtle. The onions melt on your tongue. They're not sweet, not quite savory either. They're round, complete. Like a song with no chorus but still stuck in your head. You think about what this meal means. Soup for breakfast might sound strange to someone outside your world, but here it makes sense. It's warm. It's wet. It doesn't ask much of your teeth. And on cold days, it wraps your insides in a kind of invisible wool. Historically, soups like this were foundational. In medieval Europe, Asia, and even parts of Africa, morning broths were a quiet ritual made from bones, rinds, roots, and the leftovers of better times. Onion soup in particular had its place, cheap, filling, and capable of tasting expensive if you simmered it long enough. In France, onion broth was sometimes served to servants in the early hours. In Vietnam, old people swore it could cure colds, heartaches, and poor manners. In 15th century England, pottage was the name for any stew that looked vaguely edible. They didn't even pretend to name ingredients. If it fit in the pot, it joined the team. And here's your quirky detail: in a Swiss monastery in 1379, a monk wrote an entire treatise on the spiritual symbolism of onion layers. He claimed each layer represented a stage of sin being peeled away by divine warmth. No one took him seriously until someone dropped the manuscript in soup, and the resulting flavor was reportedly divine. History does not record the monk's reaction. So was onion soup a holy meal, a poor man's trick, or just a way to stay alive without chewing? Scholars disagree, but your bowl doesn't care. You take another sip. It coats your mouth like kindness, the kind that doesn't boast, the kind you feel long after it's gone. There's something especially soothing about onions in winter. They last, they wait. Even when they sprout strange green hairs, they don't complain. You slice off the bad and use the rest. Just like people, the soup is half gone now. You drag a crust of bread through the broth yesterday's heel rock hard until you soaked it. Now it's pliable, willing. The onion flavor clings to it, elevates it. Together they become more than the sum of their sadness. Uncle Ben passes behind you and grunts in approval. That's the highest form of compliment in this household. You nod. 3 quiet chuckles for this humble bowl onion soup. Because some mornings you want your food to weep with you, not at you. You know you're poor when the most complex flavor in your house comes from time. They say broth heals the soul. Well, this one at least made yours sit up straight. You scrape the bottom of the bowl. There's a soft sliver of something that might have been leek, or maybe cabbage. You chew it thoughtfully just in case it has a story. Outside, the frost is turning to slush. A rooster announces the hour an hour late. No one corrects him, he's trying. You stretch, sigh, and let the warmth settle in your bones. Breakfast was not spectacular, but it was generous. In a quiet, slow, onion-scented way. And that on this ordinary morning is enough. The pot is already hot when you get there. Someone, probably the neighbor who never knocks, has started the fire and wandered off. That's the rhythm here. Things begin without you and wait until you arrive. Today's breakfast is humble sweet and smells faintly of toasted corn and wood smoke. You lift the lid and breathe in bonhango trantro corn cakes made with dried maize and a small amount of cooking ash, carefully sifted from clean hardwood embers. This isn't soot, it's an old method used for generations to give the batter a slight alkaline bite and deeper flavor. In this house, even what's left from fire finds a second life. You stir the mix gently. The batter is thick, speckled with black and gold. It clings to the spoon like it has opinions. That's a good sign. You ladle a scoop into the pan. It spreads slowly like honey with arthritis, then begins to hiss around the edges. The smell deepens smoky warm with that toasty corn scent that always feels like mid-autumn even when it's not. While it cooks, you think, this dish isn't glamorous. It's not what nobles eat. It's not even what you make when visitors come. It's what you cook when you've run out of other options but still want something that feels like effort. The cornmeal comes from last season's harvest ground rough coarse as peasant hands. The ash from the firewood you split 3 weeks ago back when your shoulder didn't ache every time you reached overhead. It's clean ash, sifted, pure. Just enough to add alkaline bite and a strange satisfying depth that makes the corn taste older, wiser. You flip the cake. It resists as all good things do. Then it gives turning over with a proud sizzle. The underside is golden brown with little flecks of black. Not burnt, just seasoned by circumstance. You make 3 more, stacking them slowly. They're not uniform. One is a bit lopsided, one has a crack, but together they look like a family portrait, imperfect but standing. You carry your plate to the step outside where the sun has just started climbing over the fence. The air smells like smoked dew and someone else's firewood. You take a bite. The cake crumbles just enough. The outside is crisp, the inside dense and chewy. There's sweetness from the corn, bitterness from the ash, and a texture like thick memory. It fills your mouth, presses against your teeth, and then melts, leaving warmth behind. You chew slowly. Not because you have to, but because you want to. There's something meditative about it, chewing on grain and time. Here's your historical fact. Maize wasn't native to medieval Europe, but in many parts of the world, especially Mesoamerica and later southern and eastern Europe, ash-treated corn, known as nixtamalization, became a cornerstone of peasant survival. In fact, it increased the nutritional value of the grain, making vitamin B3 more absorbable and preventing diseases like pellagra. This knowledge, carried orally and often dismissed by outsiders, was science before science had a name. A quirky side note. In 1541, a Spanish priest in what is now Guatemala wrote in his diary, "They eat ash, happily, as if it were a gift." The locals did not explain. He never figured it out. He died constipated, possibly unrelated, and the academic debate Some argue these ash-treated dishes are just survival food. Others insist they're culinary genius using chemistry without ever writing it down. So is your corn cake the product of desperation or invention, the scholars still argue. You just chew. The second cake is even better. It's cooled slightly and the flavors have settled. The bitterness is rounder. The sweetness more pronounced. It tastes like it's been thinking overnight. You eat with your fingers. Always have. Forks are for show and spoons make the cake sad. There's something satisfying about the way the warm crumbs cling to your skin. 3 fire-kissed jokes to go with your breakfast. If your food has ash in it, it's either burned or made by someone brilliant and poor. These corn cakes are like old uncles, rough, smoky, slightly bitter, but strangely comforting. Remember, if someone asks why your food tastes like a fireplace, just smile and say tradition. You finish the last bite and sit quietly. The sun has fully risen now, casting gold over the thatch roofs and muddy lanes. A dog barks. Someone is already yelling at a pig. Normal. But you're full, not stuffed, just satisfied in a way that lingers, that makes you feel sturdy. You brush crumbs from your lap, but a few stick, that's fine. You'll carry breakfast with you. You stand. The world is waiting, but it can wait 1 more minute. Because this morning you didn't just eat food. You participated in a ritual older than you, older than your roof, older than the road out of the village. And in the crisp quiet between bites, you remembered once again that being poor doesn't mean being without richness. Not when you have corn fire and the cleverness to make them dance. The wind is louder this morning. Not in a frightening way, more like a broom sweeping through the trees, brushing off what's left of the night. It brings with it the smell of earth, dew, and something faintly herbal. You duck your head out the door and sniff once, twice, then smile. Today calls for something light, quiet, and surprisingly complicated beneath its humble face. You're making jiao nan hap va bingo moi again, but not the usual kind. This is the version reserved for cold days and quiet moods. Soybean mash wrapped in steamed cabbage leaves tied together with bits of scallion and served with a tiny bowl of salty soup made from leftover garlic skins. It's a breakfast that feels like a secret, not because it's forbidden, but because no one talks about how good it is. It just is. You begin by checking the hearth, still warm. Someone threw in the roots of last year's cassava vines overnight smart. They burn long and low. You nudge a pot of water toward the flame and reach for the basket of soybeans soaked the night before. They're plump now, slightly wrinkled, the color of wet sand. You press one between your fingers, it splits neatly. Ready. You steam them in batches, then mash them gently with the back of a wooden spoon. No oil, no seasoning, just beans and steam. The texture is soft, grainy, like velvet that's been washed too many times. You pull out 3 large cabbage leaves, limp, pale, and perfect. You spoon the mash into the center of each one, fold the sides like wrapping a letter, and tie each little parcel with a loop of green onion. They look like small, edible pillows. You place them back into the steamer and cover them with a linen cloth. Meanwhile, you start the soup. It's barely a soup. Just a quick broth made from garlic-infused stems, a little leftover radish brine, and a touch of salt. It simmers fast, turns cloudy, and smells better than it looks. You strain it through cloth, as is tradition, simple, clean, and made with care. When everything is ready, you serve yourself 3 soft parcels in a shallow bowl, with the hot, salty broth on the side. You carry the meal to the doorstep because by now, the doorstep is your dining table, your desk, and your stage. The wind is calmer now. The sun, faint and filtered, lights the steam curling from your soup like calligraphy. You bite into the first cabbage parcel. It's warm, soft, nutty. The cabbage has gone almost translucent, and the soy mash inside is creamy with just enough grain to remind you it was once solid. You dip the second one into the garlic soup. It soaks up the salt, the funk, the whisper of fermented heat, and becomes something entirely different. You chew slowly like the monks do when they pretend they're not hungry. Here's your historical truth: meals like this weren't recipes, they were habits. Generations of rural households developed them as a response to fasting days, food shortages, or simply mornings when meat wasn't even a rumor. In many Buddhist and Confucian traditions, simplicity in food was praised as spiritual discipline. In monasteries across East Asia, meals of soy mashed cabbage and clear broth weren't punishment, they were practice. Quirky detail. In a 15th century Korean document, a royal cook secretly recorded the palace version of this meal. It included pine nuts, persimmon vinegar, and was served with poetry on the side. The cabbage should feel like memory, the note said. The beans, like truth. Your version has neither pine nuts nor poetry. But it does have authenticity and maybe a little genius. You finish the second parcel, then the third. Each one a little different, one more cabbage than bean, one looser than the others, one perfectly balanced, like it trained its whole life for this moment. And the soup, it's just salt, skin, and leftover thoughts, but it tastes like presents, like you're meant to be sitting exactly here, eating exactly this, listening to a rooster crow 3 fields away and not quite succeeding. Now come your 3 savory chuckles. If your breakfast looks like a package, don't be surprised when it delivers emotional comfort. Cabbage is just lettuce that's seen things. Respect its wisdom. Soybean mash, proof that bland isn't boring, it's just introverted. You clean the last of the soup with your fingers. Nothing wasted. Not here. You feel full but not weighed down. Content but alert. It's the kind of breakfast that makes you ready, not sleepy. Aunt Hoa walks past, squints at your empty bowl and says, "Fancy." You grin. She doesn't know you used the last of the cabbage. She doesn't need to. The wind picks up again, tugging at the edge of your scarf. The day is waiting, but not urgently. And as you rise, bowl in hand, stomach warm and spirit steady, you think sometimes the quietest meals are the ones that hold you together the longest. It's still early when you hear the soft clink of ceramic. Someone's moving jars. You know that sound. It's the cautious shuffle of glass against glass, the rhythm of careful choices being made. You get up, follow the noise, and find Aunt Ba hunched over the pantry shelf, muttering to herself and inspecting the huban mat. Ong nut ne, cracked honey cakes, old and firm but still edible. Barely. She notices you and gestures with the spoon. "Take one," she says. "They're getting judgmental." You reach for a cake. It's roundish, lumpy, with deep lines across the top like a dried-up field. You tap it against the shelf. It answers back. Definitely firm. Possibly hostile. But this is what makes it good. You warm the cake by holding it over the fire, not in the pan, just in your hands, turning it like a tiny sun. The crust softens slightly and the smell of honey and ash begins to rise, sweet, smoky, faintly herbal. You take a bite. It resists, then yields. The crust cracks, the inside crumbles, and suddenly you're chewing a memory, dense, dark, and quiet. The honey's not fresh. It's been stored too long. But that's the point. Time has deepened it, thickened it, made it thoughtful. This is a cake that asks you to pause. You sit on the step with your knees tucked to your chest and chew in silence. These cakes aren't made every day. Only when there's a little honey left in the combs and someone remembers. They're not festive. They're not even pretty. But they travel well. Wrapped in cloth, stuffed into pockets, slipped into bags, they survive storms, hunger, and being forgotten at the bottom of a chest for 3 weeks. In fact, that's how you rediscovered them. Last winter, you found one under your mattress. It had flattened into an oval and fused with a scrap of linen. You peeled it off, sniffed it, and because this is your life, ate it. It was still good. Here's your historical bite. Honey cakes like these were used as travel food for pilgrims, traders, and messengers across medieval Eurasia. In Persia, they were flavored with saffron. In China, they were often steamed soft, wrapped in lotus leaves. In Eastern Europe, they were dense, packed with nuts and stamped with religious symbols, edible blessings to keep you safe on the road. And the odd detail. In a 14th century Italian merchant logbook, a honey cake was once declared a legal gift and used to settle a small debt. The entry reads, "One cake, aged and firm, exchanged for the return of a missing goat." The goat reportedly responded well to the cake, though the neighbors did not. Now the debate, were honey cakes just survival snacks, or were they symbolic sustenance, ritual objects meant to carry meaning across distance and time? Scholars argue both. Some point to their sacred roles in temple offerings. Others emphasize their sheer practicality. Honey doesn't rot. Flour holds shape. What else do you need? You look down at your half-eaten cake. It's not sweet, not really, just sturdy, honest, a food that refuses to perform. You take another bite. The edges are crumbly, the center firm. There's a bitterness there, not from burn, but from the dark honey thickened by smoke and years. It coats your tongue like old news. And yet, it comforts you. You remember the time you traveled with your uncle to a nearby village. You were 12. He gave you one of these cakes wrapped in cloth and pressed into your hand like a secret. You didn't eat it until the walk back. Your feet were sore, your head was heavy, and that one mouthful made you feel like you had a roof inside your mouth. This is that taste again. The world hasn't changed, but you have. Time for your 3 travelers' jokes. This cake has survived 2 harvests, 1 flood, and a nosy rat. It deserves respect. Honey cake, the only thing that gets better the more you forget about it. If your breakfast cracks when you bite it, don't worry, it's just showing character. You finish the cake slowly, brushing crumbs into your palm and licking your fingers. Not out of greed, out of habit. These cakes are rare. You don't waste them. The wind picks up slightly, lifting your hair, rustling the bamboo out back. You exhale belly-warm breath, sweetened by sugar that's seen things. Behind you, Aunt Ba closes the pantry and whispers, "We'll make more when the bees stop judging us." You don't ask what that means, you just nod. Another bite, another moment, another quiet reminder that some foods don't shout. They wait. They carry your history wrapped in flour and time. And when you're ready, they tell it back to you. It starts with a rattle. A jar on the shelf trembles slightly when you close the door a bit too hard. You already know which one it is. The jar of tri-kai seiko. Sun-browned apple slices, strips of guava, curls of mango, and a few reddish pieces. Someone in the family must have dried long ago, though no one remembers exactly who. You take the jar down carefully, wipe the lid with your sleeve, and open it. The scent escapes like a long-kept memory, warm, tangy, and sweet, with a faint hint of something floral. It smells like summer, tucked inside cloth, like sunshine that refused to fade. You smile. You didn't expect nostalgia to arrive before breakfast, but here it is. You pick out a slice of apple, soft in the middle, slightly leathery at the edge. You chew. It's sticky sweet and tastes like a story that took its time. You settle near the fire with the jar in your lap, pulling out one piece at a time. A strip of mango, chewy, slightly tart. A slice of guava, firmer, with a floral note like fruit that has matured with dignity. Then comes a reddish piece. You're not quite sure what it is, but the scent is familiar and you take a careful bite. These aren't just snacks. They're time capsules. Dried fruit is what happens when nature says you won't stay sweet forever. And the fruit answers, "I don't need to, I'll evolve." You chew and think. Historically, drying fruit was a simple but powerful act of preservation. No sugar, no chemicals, just sunlight, air, and patience. In Vietnam, fruit was often dried on woven mats turned gently by hand. In Persia, apricots sun-dried on rooftops. In medieval China, plum leather was rolled and tied like scrolls. In Europe, slices were laid near cooling ovens to capture the last warmth of bread making. Everyone had a method. Everyone had a season. And here's a quirky detail. A 12th century Arabic medical text claimed dried pears could soothe the soul and quiet the restless heart. Maybe it's just old wisdom, but you're on your 3rd slice and it does feel calming. Of course, the scholars disagree. Some say dried fruit was a luxury, delicate, time-consuming, reserved for the well-stocked pantry. Others argue it was humble brilliance, light, portable, nutritious, and a gift from summer to winter. You lean toward the second group, because right now, chewing on a sun-preserved mango strip, it feels like you're carrying a warm season in your mouth. You reach the bottom of the jar and find a flattened piece, maybe banana, maybe sweet potato. It's gently stuck to the side. You ease it off, take a bite, and let the quiet finish the seasoning. Your cousin passes by, spots the jar, and lights up like you've opened a treasure chest. You offer a piece. He takes two. The rule is simple: if you touch it, it's yours. No one minds. 3 chewy chuckles for this sticky morning dried fruit for when you want to eat something that tastes like its own autobiography. Nothing says I plan ahead like fruit from last season still bringing joy. If it sticks to your teeth, that just means it brought a piece of sunshine with it. You close the jar gently, leaving the lid a little loose. You know someone else will come looking for it soon. The good things never stay hidden for long. You brush your fingers clean and taste a bit of apple left behind, faintly sweet, slightly earthy, like a whisper from last July. Outside, the birds are louder today. The breeze smells like new leaves. Spring is quietly arriving, one warm note at a time. But inside, your hands are sticky with memory. Your belly is quietly full of something simple and good. And for a little while, you carry summer forward into your morning. You hear the crunch before you taste it. A quiet, soft crackle like dry leaves underfoot or parchment being gently folded. You reach into the clay jar beside the hearth, and your fingers find something firm, smooth, and warm to the touch. You know this shape by feel. It's a hat de nuong roasted chestnut. You pull one out, examine its dull brown shell, and smile. There's a small split at the top, just enough to peel it open. You give it a gentle squeeze, and the shell cracks with a satisfying pop. Inside, a golden piece of soft, earthy comfort. You eat it in one bite. The texture is floury, lightly creamy, slightly dry in a way that feels nourishing. Chestnut isn't dramatic. It's steady, quiet, and comforting. You reach for another. Roasting chestnuts takes time. Not everyone does it these days. It requires patience, gathering, scoring, roasting, peeling. And in this house, it always means Aunt Chow has started early. She roasts them as soon as the season turns. No announcement, just the smell of sweet, smoky warmth drifting through the kitchen one morning, and you know it's that time again. This year's chestnuts came from the edge of the forest near the bend in the road. The old tree dropped early. You were lucky to get them. You chew slowly, letting the warmth settle. These chestnuts were roasted carefully in warm embers, turned by hand and taken out just in time, neither underdone nor scorched. Not rushed, not forgotten, just enough. Next to the jar is another parcel wrapped in waxy paper, han matong honey-glazed almonds. Technically a festive treat, but someone made them anyway. Perhaps to brighten a few gray days. You unwrap one and pop it in your mouth. The crunch is sharper, the sweetness instant. It lingers just long enough before fading into the warm flavor of roasted almond. Sweet, then grounded. They go well together, the quiet chestnut and the lively almond. One like a calm afternoon, the other like a cheerful greeting. Balance. Historically, nuts have appeared in all kinds of kitchens, from humble homes to royal feasts. In medieval Japan, chestnuts were used to thicken stews. In Persia, almonds became cake oil or even perfume. In parts of Europe, roasted nuts were handed out at weddings, both as snacks and symbolic blessings. In many households, nuts were practical and treasured. They kept well-carried flavor and could be used in both sweet and savory dishes. Almonds in particular had a second life as medicine. In old records, they were believed to calm nerves and support digestion. Here's a quirky detail. In 1436, a Catalan baker once apologized to a noblewoman who cracked a tooth on an almond cake. His letter read, "I regret the firmness of my joy, but such is the nature of almonds and men." She reportedly forgave him and later married his brother. The historical debate continues. Were nuts a luxury or a survival food, a festive treat, or a daily staple? Some scholars say they trickled down from royal tables. Others argue they were part of everyday wisdom, gathered with care, enjoyed with quiet thanks. You tend to agree with the second. You chew your almonds slowly, savoring the sweetness. Beside you, someone sneezes, probably Uncle Nam. You hand him a chestnut. He nods, no words needed. 3 nutty chuckles to carry into your day, chestnuts for when your breakfast should feel like a hug from the fire. Honey almonds, because sometimes your morning deserves a little sparkle. If it crunches and comforts you, that's not a contradiction, it's a good snack. You finish your handful, brush your fingers clean, and stretch your arms. The hearth is still warm. The air outside still cool. But inside, there's a quiet balance of salt and sweet, soft and crisp memory and present. You gather the shells into your palm and place them in the ash bucket. No waste, no ceremony, just rhythm. You stand, the day is waiting, and you steady and nourished already. All thanks to 2 kinds of nuts, a little honey, and the warmth of a kitchen that remembers what matters. This morning smells like batter. Not fresh batter, not sweet. Not the kind you'd pour into a pan with joy and flip like a circus act. This is the smell of ban chao chien lan cold porridge left over from yesterday, scooped into rough blobs, flattened with the heel of your palm and fried until golden, because nothing goes to waste. And sometimes crispy edges are the only reason to get out of bed. You walk into the kitchen just in time to see a familiar dance. Aunt Tui is at the stove, no apron hair, wrapped in a faded scarf, spatula in one hand, confidence in the other. She doesn't look at the pan. She listens for the right kind of sizzle. The not too wet, not too dry, almost ready whisper of porridge turning into breakfast. She flicks her wrist and flips one cake. It spins slightly, lands with a soft clap. You applaud silently. She ignores you. Hungry, she asks, knowing the answer. You nod. She gestures with the spatula. 2 minutes. Go wash your face. This breakfast deserves a clean mouth. You obey, because she's right. When you return, your plate is already waiting, 3 crisp discs of fried porridge, golden brown edges, lacy center, still soft. On the side, a dish of nuoc mam pha long fish sauce, watered down with garlic, a bit of lime juice, and a single chili floating like a tiny red omen. You sit on the floor by the hearth. No chair needed. The floor is warm. The food is warmer. You pick up a disc with your fingers. It's hot, greasy, slightly wobbly. You bite in. The outside shatters with a soft crackle. The inside is creamy, dense, and oddly delicate. It tastes like rice, memory familiar, comforting, deep. You dip the next bite in the sauce. The saltiness hits first, then the lime, then the heat from the chili, just enough to wake your tongue, but not your regrets. This isn't a recipe. This is instinct with a frying pan. Historically, fried porridge shows up everywhere, but never with a name. In rural Italy, it's called polenta fritta. In parts of India, old khichdi is pressed and fried into savory cakes. In China, leftover congee is shaped and seared. In Vietnam, you simply say, I fried the rice soup. Everyone understands. No one asks for more explanation. Because this is what you do when life gives you too much of yesterday and not enough of today. Here's your quirky detail. In 1529, a traveling monk in Korea wrote a haiku-style poem about cold rice cakes fried in sesame oil. The poem was short, slightly bitter, and ended with the line, crunch quiets hunger more than prayer. The monastery removed it from public view. It was too popular. And now the academic debate. Is fried porridge a peasant invention of pure thrift or a sign of culinary creativity, a form of accidental genius passed down by taste and trial? You don't need a dissertation. You have your plate. You finish one disc, start the next. This one is crispier, thinner. A bit of char at the edge gives it personality. You dip it again, and this time let it soak just a little longer. The sauce softens the crisp. You eat the entire thing in 3 slow bites. A rooster outside crows, late. No one corrects him. He's always been dramatic. You offer a piece to your cousin, who takes it without a word and immediately burns his mouth. You watch his expression carefully. He chews. Then he nods once like a soldier acknowledging a worthy opponent. 3 gently fried jokes for your morning cold porridge never dies. It just gets louder in a frying pan. If your breakfast doesn't sizzle, are you even awake yet? Leftover rice proving every day that the second act can be better than the first. You finish the last disc. It's the thickest. soft in the center like a warm memory you didn't know you needed. You scrape up the sauce with your fingers. Aunt Tui sees and smiles. That's the correct technique. The pan hisses one last time. The oil is almost done. The day has begun. And so have you, crispy-edged, soft-centered, and quietly ready for whatever the morning decides to throw your way. Because when the world gives you leftovers, you don't complain. You fry them. And you keep going. The wind today carries the scent of ash wood smoke and something unfamiliar. You pause on your way past the courtyard and sniff again. It's sweet, faint, barely there, but definitely real. You follow your nose like a sleepy dog and find yourself behind the kitchen where a small dented pot is steaming over a weak fire. Aunt Lai stands beside it, arms crossed, face serious. "What's that?" you ask. She doesn't answer at first. She stares into the steam like it owes her money. Then finally, without looking up, she says, "Sua jiao han han va rao ma almond milk with pennywort. For the fast." You'd forgotten. It's a fasting day, which means no meat, no fat, no indulgence. But strangely, that doesn't mean no flavor. In fact, fast day breakfasts are where the real magic happens. It's where cooks stretch rules into ribbons, inventing fake meats, mock broths, and spiritual loopholes so creative they should be canonized. You step closer. The pot smells strange but inviting, nutty green toasty. She ladles some into a clay cup and hands it to you without a word. You take a sip. It's warm, thin, and earthy. The almond milk is sweet but not sugary, more like the ghost of sweetness. The pennywort, chopped fine, boiled down, adds a slightly bitter note like grass that got philosophical. It's good, in a quiet, strange, convincing way. You sip again, your belly relaxes. Aunt Lai starts preparing something else. A wooden board appears. Onto it, she lays small, damp bundles wrapped in banana leaf. You recognize them, trungjia mock eggs. Made from mashed mung beans, turmeric, and sesame pressed into a soft yellow yolk shape, then wrapped in a white rice dough white. They look almost real. You laugh. Who are we trying to fool? She shrugs. Not God, just our mouths. You help unwrap one. The egg inside is warm, soft, slightly oily from the sesame. You bite in. The mung bean paste crumbles earthy and rich, the turmeric giving it a savory warmth. The rice dough around it is chewy plain, like the silence between thoughts. You chew slowly. There's joy in the fakery. It's not tricking the tongue, it's delighting it. Reminding it that memory can be a seasoning too. Here's the history during religious fasting days in many cultures. Buddhist, Christian, even some Islamic traditions, cooks created elaborate mock dishes to respect the letter of the law while still feeding the soul. Meat made from beans, milk from seeds, eggs from anything but chickens. In medieval Europe, Lent cuisine included fish-shaped pastries filled with almonds. In China, monks crafted roast duck from pressed tofu skin. In Vietnam, home cooks perfected cha-che vegetarian sausage made with banana hearts, mushroom stems, and confidence. And the oddity. In 1458, a royal cook in Ayutthaya reportedly created a fasting feast so convincing that the king didn't realize it was vegetarian until 3 weeks later. The cook was not punished. She was promoted to royal advisor. The debate, of course, is ongoing. Do these foods represent devotion or defiance? Are they holy cheats or spiritual creativity? Some argue it's cheating. Others argue it's devotion expressed through flavor. And you take another bite of fake egg and let it answer for you. It tastes like belief. You drink the last of your almond broth. It's cooled now and slightly thicker. A small skin is formed on the top. You stir it back in. Nearby, a child asks, "Are we pretending today?" Someone answers, "We're remembering." 3 quietly irreverent jokes for this gentle fast. If the egg isn't real but still makes you full, was it ever truly fake? Almond milk for when your cow takes a vow of silence. You're not cheating the fast, you're just improvising with reverence. The meal ends not with fullness, but with clarity. You don't feel heavy. You don't feel hungry. You feel balanced, like someone whispered breakfast into your bones. Aunt Lai wipes her hands on her apron and says, "No meat, but still morning." That's enough. You nod. Because it is. The kitchen is silent this morning. No sizzling. No bubbling pots. No murmured curses over burnt crusts or someone stealing the last slice of radish pickle. Just steam. Rising in gentle ribbons from a bamboo steamer tucked in the corner and the soft, rhythmic thump of someone kneading dough on the counter. You recognize the mood. It's a fast day breakfast, but not just any. It's one of the quiet ones when even laughter feels too loud and the food is made not just for the body but for the spirit. You move more slowly than usual, as if your own footsteps might disturb something sacred. On the table are three things: a tray of steamed bon bot lok che, tiny dumplings filled with mung bean paste and chopped herbs, a small basket of lavoy tea leaves dried and crumbled, and a still warm bowl of chow long nao tu hat ke millet porridge, pale, watery, nearly transparent. No oil, no salt, no indulgence, just quiet food. You take a seat. No one says a word. Aunt Sao finishes pressing the last dumpling, places it gently into the steamer, and joins you. She hands you a cup of leaf tea. It's bitter, deeply so. It grips the sides of your mouth and settles under your tongue like old advice. But it's cleansing, a reset button for your taste buds, your breath, your thoughts. You take a spoonful of porridge. It barely clings to the spoon. The millet has broken down into soft, translucent bits suspended in water. It tastes like nothing, and yet there's a comfort to it. A calm, a kindness. You chew even though it doesn't require it. Not because of texture, but because of attention. You eat slowly, deliberately, as if every bite were a question and your stomach was quietly answering, "Yes, I'm still here." The dumplings are ready. Aunt Sao opens the steamer and a wave of warm herbal fragrance drifts into the air. The dumplings are translucent, shimmering slightly. You can see the green flecks of herb inside the golden smear of mung bean. You pick one up with your fingers. It's sticky, soft, warm. You bite in. The filling is mild, savory, just a little sweet from the beans. There's no spice, no flash, just texture and warmth and gentle thoughtfulness. It's food that doesn't perform, just exists. You remember what she told you once: when the world is too loud, cook like you're whispering. This is that. Whispered food, whispered hunger, whispered gratitude. Historically, fast day meals in rural Vietnam were layered in meaning. They weren't just about abstaining. They were about remembering. Remembering loss. Remembering ancestors. Remembering that comfort could be made without cost. Dishes were designed to be silent in the mouth, light in the belly, and heavy in the soul. In Buddhist kitchens, steamed dumplings were symbols of compassion, folded by hand, made with patience, filled with soft things. Millet porridge was considered food that leaves no shadow, gentle, temporary, restorative. Odd historical footnote. In a 14th century Zen temple journal, a monk wrote that millet porridge was the closest taste to prayer. He was mocked for it until another monk tried it during a fast and wept quietly into his bowl. The entry was amended, perhaps the taste of surrender too, and the scholarly debate: is fast day food about denial or recalibration? Is the point to abstain from pleasure or to rediscover it in stillness, in simplicity? In things that don't beg for your attention. You finish your dumpling, take another. And somewhere between the third and fourth bite, you realize your breath has slowed. Your shoulders are less tense. Your eyes have softened. Nothing flashy, nothing fried, nothing loud, and yet you feel more nourished than you have all week. 3 quiet laughs to match the quiet meal. If your breakfast can't wake you up, maybe it can calm you down instead. Dumplings without meat are still dumplings. They just keep their wisdom on the inside. Millet porridge for when your soul needs a warm hand more than a full stomach. You finish your bowl, not full, but steadied. The tea is now cold. You drink it anyway. It's more bitter than before, but it's good bitterness. Honest. Like a reminder, not everything needs to be sweet to be kind. Aunt Sow stands and starts tidying up. She hums, not a tune, just a sound, a vibration in her throat that makes the room feel warm. You help, because even a quiet morning needs closing gestures. And when it's done, when the bowls are washed, the steam has faded and the last dumpling has been carefully wrapped for the old man down the road, you step outside and breathe in the wind. And you carry the silence with you. Not emptiness, but enough. The market smells different today. Not of spices or meat or anything vibrant. It smells neutral, like straw, like old baskets, like patience. And in one corner, tucked between a woman selling pickled bamboo and a boy shouting about dried fish, there's a tiny table covered in colorless snacks. You stop, because colorless things are often the most intriguing. An old man sits behind the table, fanning himself with a palm frond surrounded by neat bundles wrapped in pale cloth. No labels, no signs. Just a slow nod when you meet his eye. You gesture to the smallest bundle. He unwraps it. Inside, a collection of cold, steamed cakes, white, soft, faintly translucent. Each shaped like a pebble, smelling like almost nothing. You pick one up, unsure if you're about to bite into rice or memory. You taste it. It is extremely plain, like eating silence. But as you chew, something begins to unfold. It's lightly sweet, barely sticky, and has the whisper of coconut, like someone thought about coconut very hard and then walked away. This is quiet food for quiet days, specifically creative fasting food born from centuries of culinary improvisation. You try another cake. This one is made of steamed taro and rice starch mashed until smooth and folded into itself. No sugar, no salt. But the texture is lovely, smooth, waxy, clean. You finish it slowly, each bite a meditation. The old man pours you a small drink. It's fish milk, no, not actual fish milk. That would be weird. It's a misnomer. It's made from soaked mung bean sesame and a few fermented leaves whisked into a milky consistency. It's tangy, creamy. A bit confusing. You like it. He tells you softly that during the hardest fasts, those without oil, spice, or sugar, the only way to stay nourished was to reimagine ingredients. Cakes from root pulp, milk from seeds, sweets from dried leaves. The result wasn't just food, it was philosophy in edible form. You nod, then unwrap another bundle. Inside are rolled fruit skins made from stewed guava, mashed into thin sheets, dried on bamboo and rolled like scrolls. They look like snail shells. You bite one. It's tart, sweet, sticky, and totally different from everything else. You raise an eyebrow. The old man shrugs. Balance, he says. Too much purity is also a mistake. You laugh. Here's your fun historical quirk. In 1672, a monk in northern Vietnam wrote a scroll of foods allowed during fasts, except half of them were clearly just normal food disguised as penance. Taro was labeled soft stone. Coconut was moon fat. And one entry, simply called cloud essence, turned out to be sugar rolled in rice powder and served on lotus leaves. Creative, very cheating, depends who's watching. The academic debate continues. Are these adaptations culinary resistance or just survival with style? Do they break the fast or redefine it? You think of it as a wink across history. A way to say I respect the rules, but also I'm hungry. 3 chewy jokes for your minimalist brunch. If your breakfast has no flavor but still makes you happy, it's either genius or witchcraft. Rice cakes for when your soul craves something quiet and your jaw needs a job. Fast day milk made from seeds because cows aren't always available or in the mood. You thank the old man. He wraps up one cake for you for the road. You tuck it into your sleeve like a talisman. As you leave the market, your steps are light, not from energy but from clarity. There's something about food that doesn't shout. It lets you hear your own thoughts. And when the world around you is buzzing, crackling, crying, it's good to find a moment where your meal simply exists and reminds you that delicacy isn't always in the flavor. Sometimes it's in the intention. Today starts with something unusual, a knock. Not the rooster, not the kettle, not the neighbor's baby. An actual knock, soft, deliberate, and followed by the unmistakable rustle of someone trying to look casual while holding something very warm and slightly leaking. You open the door. It's Batu, the widow from 2 houses down. Her arms are wrapped around a covered clay pot. Her hair is wild, her sandals unmatched. Her eyes sparkle with the unmistakable look of someone who has made pancakes on a fast day and is ready to argue about it. "Eat this," she says, pushing the pot into your hands. "Don't ask questions." You don't. You bring the pot inside and open it carefully. Inside are 6 thick folded pancakes, still steaming, layered with leaves to keep them from sticking together. They're dense, almost too heavy for how small they look. Each one is brownish, slightly glossy, and smells faintly of mung bean and coconut, though there's something else in there too. Something unexpected. You pick one up. It's warm, pliable, slightly sticky. You break it in half. The inside reveals a swirl of shredded banana flour, a ribbon of coconut flesh, and wait, is that black sesame? Yes. Yes, it is. You take a bite. It's sweet, savory, nutty, and oddly tangy. There's no meat, no egg, no oil. And yet it tastes like celebration. You chew slowly, letting the layers unfold like a folk tale. This is a folded, fast day pancake, and it might just be the most complex thing you've eaten all week. You flip through your memory. This kind of cake is rarely made anymore. It's old. A recipe passed down like a riddle. One version from the north uses pickled lotus. Another from the south adds fermented rice. Batu, it seems, has created her own hybrid because of course she has. Historically, these pancakes weren't just food. They were coded rituals. Made during fast days, grief periods, or quiet community gatherings where meat was banned but company was not. The folding symbolized layers of prayer, memory, or intention. Each layer said something. The ingredients whispered more. Ingredients whispered. You chew and think. The sweetness comes from slow-stirred coconut reduction, no sugar, just time and stirring and maybe a little gossip. The chewiness comes from rice flour rested overnight with a hint of ground ginger. The black sesame isn't just for flavor, it's tradition. A tiny speck of darkness wrapped in softness. You wonder, are you eating a pancake or a poem? Odd fact of the day. In 1594, a Vietnamese noblewoman wrote a series of recipes as poems, each describing quiet dishes for holy days. One stanza begins, "I folded like breath, filled like dusk, a pancake for when the mouth is not allowed to speak but must still feel warm." The recipe was later outlawed for being too melancholic. Naturally, everyone memorized it, and the academic debate, "Oh, it simmers like coconut cream." Some culinary historians insist these were purely ritual foods used for mourning or abstinence. Others say they were subversive treats where women experimented with flavor in coded, socially accepted formats. Still others claim pancakes are universal and we're all overthinking it. You take another bite and decide you're fine with overthinking, especially if it comes with sesame and banana flour. 3 folded jokes to honor this layered delight. If your pancake contains 0 meat but 12 ingredients, congratulations, it's a fast day paradox. Folding a pancake is like folding laundry, tedious but somehow deeply satisfying. Never trust a flat pancake. The secrets are always in the folds. You wrap the last one for later. Not because you're full, but because it feels too special to rush. This is breakfast that waits with you, not just for you. You step outside, still chewing. Batu is already halfway down the road lecturing a chicken. You wave. She doesn't look back. She knows. Some days, simplicity saves you. Other days, it's complexity that feels like a blessing hidden in folds flavored with memory and carried by someone with wild hair and unmatched sandals. And when that day comes, you eat the pancake and say thank you with your teeth. The sky is gray today, not stormy, not cold, just a soft cottony gray, like someone forgot to wash the clouds properly. And maybe that's why everyone in the house is quiet, even the floorboards. You're sitting in the corner kitchen picking at a plate of roasted chestnuts. They weren't roasted over a modern flame, of course. No one here has time for that kind of convenience. These chestnuts were roasted the old way, tossed with sand in a huge black pan over fire stirred with a wooden paddle until the shells cracked and their bellies split open like sleepy eyes. You peel one. The shell is stubborn hot at the tips and the nut inside is wrinkled and pale. You bite in. It's soft, slightly sweet. It has that powdery texture that tastes like smoke and afternoon naps. Aunt Ngok says chestnuts are for quiet bravery, the kind you don't shout about. The kind that warms your fingers slowly while you wait for better weather. Beside you is a jar of Han Nan Matong Rangjian honey-roasted almonds. Very different energy. The almonds are slick, shiny, coated in a sticky glaze that crackles between your teeth. You alternate bites, one chestnut, one almond. Like pairing humility with just a dash of sparkle. And somehow it works. These are the snacks of survival and generosity, things that get passed around on long walks, slipped into coat pockets, or left quietly on a sickbed table. Small, nourishing, non-intrusive, but with presence. Like someone saying, "I see you," in food form. Historically, both chestnuts and almonds were used by farmers and travelers alike, not just for energy, but for comfort. Chestnuts especially were called bread of the poor across Europe and Asia. Easy to forage, hard to store, best eaten warm. In Vietnam, roasted chestnuts were a winter luxury, not because they were rare, but because they required time, care, and patience. You didn't roast chestnuts unless you planned to sit down and eat them with someone. Almonds, on the other hand, were less common, often gifted by travelers or monks, especially when honey was involved. That glaze took work, and honey wasn't something you wasted on unimportant days. Fun historical quirk. A 10th century Vietnamese story tells of a merchant who proposed to his lover not with gold, but with a small pouch of honey-roasted almonds. She accepted. But later, when asked why, she said, "If he's willing to give me snacks instead of promises, I'll be well fed either way." The academic disagreement. You guessed it, whether snacks like these were signs of economic cleverness or emotional luxury. Did people eat chestnuts because they were cheap or because they made hard days feel a little softer? Were almonds for rich folk or just folks who knew how to plan ahead? You think maybe both. Because right now, alternating between humble and fancy nuts, you feel both grounded and a little spoiled. You offer one to your cousin. He takes an almond, then 2 chestnuts. Balance, he says, mouthful. 3 nutty jokes to go with this gentle gray morning roasted chestnuts, the only food that says, "Yes, I'm warm," but emotionally distant. Honey roasted almonds, proof that even stoic food has a sweet side. If snacks could talk, chestnuts would sigh and almonds would wink. You peel another chestnut, the steam curls out like breath. Outside, someone is sweeping leaves. Inside, the kettle hisses. The world turns slowly, but you're not in a rush, because some mornings are about doing less, tasting more, and honoring the quiet with your hands full. And if that means eating 12 chestnuts and 7 almonds before anyone speaks again, so be it. You're surviving, softly, sweetly, snack by snack. There's something strange about today's breakfast. It isn't the food, it's the way it's being eaten. You walk into the kitchen and everyone is facing the wall, not out of shame. Not some new ritual, just eating quietly, shoulder to shoulder, all eyes fixed forward like it's a classroom and the porridge is about to give a lecture. You grab a bowl and fall in line. What's in the bowl is simple misoi hapkwon voi rao rung, steamed handmade noodles rolled around wild greens topped with a drizzle of fermented soybean paste. It's soft, green, a little funky, a little warm. The noodles are rice-based, made by hand, and steamed on cloth stretched over a pot. You can see the tiny bubbles in their surface like little breath marks. The greens are bitter in a brave kind of way. The soybean paste is salty aged and absolutely doing all the talking. You chew, slowly. The texture shifts with each bite, slippery, fibrous, then creamy. Your mouth feels like it's solving a puzzle. Still, no one says a word. You whisper, "Why's everyone eating like we're in a temple?" Your aunt whispers back, "Because this is ritual food." You don't talk over intention. Ah, right. This breakfast isn't just fast day compliant, it's remembrance food. The kind made on anniversaries, for ancestors, for memories, for people who are no longer here to eat with you, but whose tastes still sit at the table. You take another bite this time more thoughtfully. You let the bitter greens do their job. Let the paste hum in the back of your throat. Let the noodle carry you bite by bite towards some unspoken ending. This is the kind of food that tastes like grief, but also like endurance. Historically, dishes like this were eaten during Gaijio death anniversaries, not as mourning, but as continuity. Each bite a quiet chorus, we remember, we remember, we remember. In many Vietnamese households, it's said that food offered to the dead must be made with care, but no ego. It must be humble, nourishing, symbolic, not showy. Noodles symbolize continuity. Greens symbolize growth. Paste symbolizes time fermentation, the patience of age. Quirky historical footnote. In a 12th century pagoda record, a monk wrote that on remembrance days, all meals must be served at the same temperature, neither hot nor cold, because the dead do not like extremes. Warmth is memory. Heat is arrogance. The temple later admitted it was probably just a way to control kitchen fires. And the eternal scholarly question: do ritual meals feed the ancestors or the living? Are they acts of cultural preservation or culinary performance? When we eat in silence, are we respecting the past or just afraid of it? You don't have answers. You have noodles, and they're telling you that grief can be gentle too. 3 respectful bites of humor for the sake of balance. If your noodle is long enough, it becomes a timeline. Just don't slurp history. Bitter greens, because sometimes your soul needs a little leafy honesty. Soybean paste for when you want your breakfast to taste like someone else's wisdom. You finish your bowl. The last bite is the best. Somehow softer, somehow more rooted. Aunt clears the table in silence. No one speaks until the bowls are washed. Then, as if on cue, someone sneezes. The spell breaks. A cousin laughs. Another starts making tea. The room exhales. It's not sad anymore, it's just still. You leave the kitchen and pass the family altar. A stick of incense is still burning. A small plate of the same noodles you just ate sits beneath it. No one expects the dead to eat, but everyone knows they'd recognize the taste and smile. You're walking through the garden barefoot. The soil is cool, a little damp, and every step presses your heel gently into the memory of rain. You're not here to harvest. Not really. You're here to wander, to feel the plants lean toward you like old friends. And maybe, just maybe, to see if the dried snacks are ready. Under the bamboo trellis in the last patch of sun, hang rows of fruit leather, long, thin strips of jackfruit, guava, and tamarind that were mashed, boiled, and spread into thin sheets days ago. They've been drying for 3 mornings now, covered by mesh nets and quiet optimism. You touch one. It resists slightly, then bends just right. You pull off a strip of guava leather dusted with a little rice powder to keep it from sticking. It smells tangy, sweet, dusty in the best way. You bite in. It sticks to your teeth immediately. Perfect. Fruit leather is the memory of fruit, all the water gone, all the sugar concentrated, and none of the flashiness of a fresh slice. It's humble, patient, more echo than voice. As you chew, Aunt Zhao walks by holding a tray of steamed cassava slices, slightly yellow from turmeric, topped with a drizzle of coconut milk and sesame seeds. Taste this, she says before you can even ask. You do. The cassava is soft but firm, earthy but bright. The turmeric hums in the back of your mouth like a drumbeat you didn't know you needed. The coconut milk is warm, not sweet. Just fatty enough to feel like comfort in liquid form. This is what preservation tastes like, not just of food, but of days of ritual, of ingredients saved from spoiling and turned into something stronger. You sit under the trellis. The sun shifts slightly. The strips of jackfruit leather sway like lazy flags. You pull one down and nibble it slowly. Historically preserved snacks were more than storage solutions. They were emotional insurance. Food for when life turned suddenly unpredictable storms. Sickness, fasting, long journeys. and they were made with care because what you saved was what you trusted. In Vietnam, mut deo or chewy preserves were a staple of both peasant households and temples. Tamarind leather, often too sour for children, was beloved by elders. Jackfruit strips were favored during Tet both as gifts and as portable joy. Funny side note. In the 1800s, a French traveler wrote in his diary, "The locals eat something that smells like glue and smiles." He was talking about jackfruit leather. He later became addicted and tried to smuggle 4 kilos home. Customs were not amused, and the academic side glance. Do these preserved snacks represent scarcity or resilience? Are they emergency food or celebration in slow motion? Were they born of poverty or proof that creativity blooms when the weather doesn't cooperate? You lean back and pull off another strip. This one is tamarind. It punches you in the teeth in a good way. Sour, deep, sticky like a secret. You love it. 3 chewy jokes for your slow afternoon snack. Fruit leather, the original scroll of flavor. Read with your tongue, not your eyes. Steamed cassava like mashed potatoes, but raised by monks and turmeric. Preserved snacks, because not all good things come fresh or on schedule. The day drifts. No one calls for you. No chores need doing. Just you, a pocket full of dried guava, and the slow satisfaction of snacks that waited for you. And isn't that what survival really is? A strip of sour, sweet memory still good after all this time. You wake to the sound of water. Not rain, not a bucket. Just the rhythmic splish-splash of someone rinsing something delicate in a clay bowl. You follow the sound into the back courtyard where Aunt Lai is sitting cross-legged, her sleeves rolled up, her hands gently working a lump of dough in a basin of warm water. It's steamed rice bread day, or as she calls it, sun bread. She doesn't look up, just pats the bench beside her. You sit. The courtyard is quiet, save for the occasional creak of bamboo in the wind and the soft hum of pigeons from the rooftop. She pulls the dough apart into little palm-sized rounds and places them on banana leaves. They glisten in the light, pale and soft, barely more than flour and water, but full of sun and waiting. Sunbread isn't baked. It's not even really steamed. It's half-dried, half-patience, made from soaked rice flour and a trace of fermented starter pressed thin and laid in the sun until the texture turns from creamy to chewy to firm. No crust, no golden edges, just quiet, obedient resilience. You pick up a finished one from the tray. It's still warm, slightly rubbery, with a faint nutty smell. You take a bite. It squeaks between your teeth. It's not exactly delicious, but it's calm, like the culinary equivalent of a nap. She passes you a small dish of crushed sesame salt to dip it in. And now it's perfect. This is crisis food, the kind made for floods, for famines, for fasting days that turn into fasting weeks. Sunbread keeps. It stores well. It doesn't mold easily. And when paired with anything sesame, pickled greens, or even boiled water, it feels like a meal. You remember a story your grandfather once told during the Great Flood. All they had were sunbreads tied in bamboo slings, eaten cold while clinging to rooftops. No one spoke. They just chewed and stayed alive. You chew slower now. This isn't just food, it's memory laminated in starch. Historically, these breads, known in some places as bon foi, swang, or dew cakes, were crafted by the poorest families using the least risky ingredients: rice, thyme, and sun. Some added cassava or corn, others mixed in bean flour when they could afford it. The important thing wasn't the flavor, it was the existence. The bread meant we have something. We will keep going. Odd footnote from a 15th century journal: a noblewoman who disguised herself as a beggar during war supposedly survived 2 weeks hiding in the hills with only sunbread and river water. She later wrote that the bread tasted like freedom and a little bit like shame. Her memoir became popular, then banned for sounding too relatable. And the scholarly murmur: is sunbread an emblem of poverty or a culinary monument to adaptation? Is it barely food or the essence of food? Flour, time, intention. You lean toward the latter, especially when Aunt Lai drizzles a bit of ginger syrup over one and hands it to you with a wink. Luxury edition, she says. You laugh. It's chewy, soft, sweet, spicy in the throat. Luxury is relative, and relief tastes better when it's earned. 3 sun-baked jokes for your shadowless snack sunbread when your pantry gives you nothing but your schedule gives you 3 days of sunshine. Crisis carbs now with 80% hope, 10% starch, and 10% pigeon supervision. If your snack squeaks but comforts your soul, it's probably doing something right. You finish your slice. Aunt Lai wraps the rest in a cloth and sends you off. You tuck it under your arm, still warm. Later, you'll eat it on a walk, or in the shade, or when the rain returns and you need something that tastes like quiet courage. Because that's what sunbread is. Not tasty, not flashy. But there when it matters. And in times of silence and waiting that is everything. It's the last morning of the long dry spell. Not the kind that cracks the earth, but the kind that settles into conversation, dries up laughter, and makes every pot of rice feel heavier than it should. The kind of stretch where you count meals in mouthfuls and hope your pickled stash lasts just a bit longer. But today something smells different. You follow it nose first into the back of the house where Uncle Vin stands at the stove ladling something thick and golden into tiny ceramic bowls. His eyebrows are sweaty, his expression suspiciously triumphant. Crisis pudding, he declares, handing you a bowl. You look down. Inside is a wobbly, gelatinous rice jelly, translucent, speckled with mung bean bits topped with a swirl of palm sugar syrup and coconut milk. You raise an eyebrow. This is famine food, you ask. He nods, the kind you eat to remember you're still alive. You take a bite. It's soft, cool, just a little sweet. The mung beans add a satisfying crumble while the syrup sticks to your tongue like a long, slow sigh. You weren't expecting to love it, but you do. It's gentle, soothing, completely unnecessary, which is exactly why it matters. During famines, households that could afford to make even one small sweet dish did so not for nutrition, but for morale. To remind each other you are still here. You still have taste buds. You still deserve joy. This jelly is known as che nep nuoc, or sticky rice pudding. But during hard times, it was stripped down, no pandan, no lotus seed, just soaked rice, mashed beans, and patience. And maybe one spoonful of syrup if the gods were generous. You finish the bowl slowly. Uncle Vin tells you of the siege puddings made in ancient citadels, boiled turnip mash passed off as porridge. Of ban chai, the burnt cake born from rice crusts, scraped off pots and fried into something resembling survival. Of old women who made sugarless confections for grandchildren just to see their eyes light up. And you think when everything else is gone, sweetness is not optional, it's defiance. Strange fact. In the 13th century, an entire village was punished for throwing a quiet feast during a state-declared famine. The officials accused them of unruly cheerfulness. Their defense, the dishes were made from weeds and memory. The court couldn't decide whether to be angry or impressed, and the long, lingering scholarly debate. Were these cheerful famine foods a form of communal coping or thinly veiled rebellion? Did they comfort or distract, heal or hide? You don't have the answers. You just have your second bowl of rice jelly, and it tastes like someone whispered hope into starch. 3 final bites of bittersweet comedy. Crisis jelly, because sometimes your emergency plan includes dessert. If a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, what helps the sugar go down during war? Answer mung beans. Burnt cake for when you can't afford failure, but accidentally invent a snack. The sky darkens slightly. Maybe rain is finally coming. Uncle Vin packs the leftovers into jars just in case. You help, because you know now every crisis has a snack. Not to fill your belly, but to keep your soul from caving in. And the ones made at the end, the ones served when you've got nothing left but steam scraps and stubborn love, those are the ones that stay in your mouth the longest. And just like that, the story winds down. You light a small oil lamp. You sit by the window holding a warm jar of pudding. The world is still unpredictable, but your stomach, your heart, for now they are quiet, sweet, steady. So here you are at the end of a long, crumbly, slightly chewy journey through quiet breakfasts and louder silences. Maybe your eyes are heavier now. Maybe your mind has wandered a little like a spoon circling the edge of an old ceramic bowl. That's all right. That's part of the ritual too. Because this wasn't just a history of food. It was a history of stillness, of rice cracked open by time, of greens bitter enough to remind you you're alive, of folded pancakes, dried fruits, squeaky sunbreads, and pudding that dared to be sweet when the world was not. Every dish whispered the same thing. You are still here. You are allowed to rest. You are made of more than scarcity. In the dim corners of history, these breakfasts were never loud. They weren't meant to impress. They were meant to carry, to hold, to survive just long enough for joy to remember your name. And now, you've made it to the end. So pull your blanket higher, let your shoulders drop. Let the crumbs of old stories settle at your feet. And remember, the smallest meals often carry the warmest truths. That's the story for tonight. May your dreams be filled with wonder and peace.